Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Bright Line podcast, Tales from Recovering Food Addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about self-care and how this fits in with the program and what you can do for self-care and what this looks like. I think that the topic came up specifically when I started doing the IFS internal family systems parts work. I realized that one of the loudest parts for me when it came to my food chatter was the comforter or the caregiver, or is there another name, Robin, that I'm missing?
No, I mean, you can call that part, whatever you want.
Okay, so in my mind, it's a little Susie homemaker,
right?
You know what I mean, with the, the skirt and the apron, and that's what she looks like.
You can even give her a name. She can be Susie.
Sure, whatever. I don't talk to her. I don't know. That's a little weird for me. I'm not down for. I mean, that's not where I'm at with IFS. Right. But I can definitely recognize that there's a part of me that sees because. My mom was always very loving and food was always involved in that. That's what I see as a treat, as a self-care, as soothing, absolutely. Yeah. And so when I had a hard day or when life got lifey, the self-care for me was always the indulgence of food. And so I think that one of the things that I've had to reframe and that I really started working on from the very beginning of my BLE journey was reframing what that indulgence could look like. And then it didn't have to be food anymore, that it could be another form of self-care.
Yeah, but I think that's a really big thing because so many people in our generation, learn to self-soothe with either food or alcohol, right? And for a lot of people, that's also, now it can be sex or shopping or, even our little, phone devices give us, a dopamine hit. And being willing to learn and explore what alternate hits are that maybe take a little bit more work, right? And that are not as easy, right? That are not the junk, right? Whether I think we have to be willing to explore just different choices and be curious,
right? And what that looks like, and what that looks like for each of us. So, for me on my journey, I've had to figure out something else that fills that hole, right? That food hole. Right. So it's like I've had a bad day. What do I do? Or I'm feeling stressed. Like, what do I do? So, there's a couple different things that I like to do for self-care.
What do you do?
So,
what do you do?
Yeah, what do I do? So I like to go get, mani-pedis. I really like to do the sensory deprivation floating, massages, and all these things. Those are money, those are things that are, they cost money.
Right.
But I also sometimes like a really nice, face mask at home, or, I like to hike. So that's something else that I can do just as a self-care function for my mental health. And even just sometimes being quiet or like watching a fun movie or something like that. I think that there's a lot of things that you can do to replace the food and really just take food out of the equation. So did you have something to say, Bonnie?
Yeah, I mean, I think I also have an indulger part, I think as a result of just early childhood trauma and deprivation. The indulger is like, well, here, have this, you deserve it. It'll make you feel better. And so that just led to a whole life of, it's, not like I, ever went on long binges of lots of food, but more just constant snacking, right? Yeah. Every time I'd have an emotion that was uncomfortable, I would just get a snack. And really it became so automatic. I had so much automaticity around snacking, right? That I found myself, seeking out a therapist and saying, I'm just doing this. Like, I literally just find myself at the pantry, right? Opening it up for a snack and And I can't stop. And, she's like, well, why do you think you're doing that? I'm like, well, I don't know. That's why I'm here. And we didn't get very far. So, why I was doing it is I have an indulger part that was helping me with trauma, and I had a food addiction. And so those two layers of things made it impossible for me to stop that, right? Not only did I have that part of myself that was fully engaged and had no other avenues to relieve my stress, but also I had the chemical food addiction on top of it. So it's just the double whammy that many of us have. That's just, until you can become abstinent from those substances, you're not going to be able to conquer them for any sustained period of time. I've definitely had to slowly find my way to some other methods, and I would say kind of kicking and screaming. I just had a hard time thinking of anything else that could remotely make me feel the way food made me feel.
Which is so, but when you think about that, and it's so common, I hear that from so many people, because food it's the quick, easy hit, and that automaticity, right? Our brains know it's coming. It's coming. Right? And I get that dopamine hit, and if I'm trying to do something new, my brain doesn't know that's gonna feel as good, and so there's that resistance to that.
And it kind of doesn't. I mean, as a phishician, I remember I had a patient who had been addicted to cocaine, and he had been sober for 10 years. And he said, every morning I wake up and think, man, I feel good.
Right.
And then I say, I'm sober, I'm not going to do that, right?
Right.
And I mean, the beautiful thing is I don't have that with my food anymore. I really don't. With this program, within several weeks of starting, those intense food cravings I have not had. So the things that I have instituted for self-care are activity. I do have a nice garden, and I'll just literally go out, like Robin said, I'll go pick weeds, or I'll just go walk around outside. And I now will try to anticipate. I've kind of forced myself to learn what kind of things were triggering. I have a meeting coming up that's going to be really challenging. Okay, well, let's think about why is that going to be really challenging? Okay, well, if I'm very prepared, is that going to help? Yeah, probably, right? So maybe I take a little extra time that I didn't used to take to prepare for that, so that this doesn't feel stressful, right? So be kind of getting more granular and digging into the things that were triggering, the behavior, and learning the self-care, making sure to take time to prepare for those things. And sometimes you're just going to have an experience with someone you have conflict with that you can't control. And again, I'll do things like go outside, make a cup of tea, have coffee, go for a walk.
But really just that bunny slipper mentality, right? That I know Susan talks about in the BLE program, just that there are times when you just have to be soft with yourself in the world, and I think that that's what self-care can really look like. And I know for the first couple months in the program, I did not want to get off the couch. I didn't. And it was okay. It was okay, right? I needed that indulgence of, and I hate to even use the word lazy because I don't feel like I was being lazy, right? Yeah, that's not the correct word. But just the bunny slipper mentality of I have to be soft with myself because of all the changes I'm making in my life. And that was self-care, and I think we have, let's back up a little bit. You talked about, generationally and, being a part, I'm straddling 2 generations personally, but, having that Gen X mentality of work, work. And it's we don't take the time to take care of ourselves. And I know that the value, we value ourselves by how much we're outputting. You know what I mean?
What did I do?
And what can I show for? Not only just what I do, but what did I accomplish, right? And I think that that's very much, and especially as women, and I don't want to discount men in this at all, but I think as women, we have to fight even harder for that output show. And so I think that to say to myself, it's okay to just sit on the couch. Is an indulgence.
Oh yes, totally.
And but the permission giving that needs to happen around that. You can probably talk about this because I'm looking at Robin.
For me.
I'm looking at Robin because there's so much psychology there about the fact that I need somebody to give me, I needed someone to give me permission to not hike 2 weeks ago. I don't know if I told you that, but it's I was just all worked up in my head about I need to get on this hike because I said I was going to hike today. And someone said to me, Meagan, don't hike. You don't need to hike. And I'm like, why could I not come to that conclusion on my own that it was okay to not do that?
That you could give yourself permission, right?
Right, that I didn't need someone else to give me permission.
Right. So here's the thing, right? We came from the generation where, our parents would have to write us permission slips for things at school. And the really cool thing that I like to have people internalize is we get to write our own permission slips, right? And we get to have our own wonderful little permission fairy. And the permission fairy gets to come down, right?
Permission fairy, yes it is, I love it.
Right? And so we can kind of turn to maybe that part of ourself that becomes our own little internal permission fairy that says, hey, right now, I think we need to give ourselves permission to do X, Y, Z. Right? And I want to talk a little bit more about self-care, but then I also want to talk about a harder topic, which is self-sabotage.
Okay.
Sometimes we confuse the two.
Buckle up, people.
Right? Right? So a lot of people, Bonnie, like you were naming, and sometimes it's like, well, but what do I even do? What the heck is self-care, right? And the really cool thing is you can go online and you can Google self-care ideas, right? And come up with a whole bunch.
There's a whole Pinterest board and a half.
Right? And whether that's, like I have a tiny little thing of bubbles that my cousin gave me when he had gone to a wedding, right? I'm gonna get the bubbles out. With my kiddo, we used to Google fat puppy videos. And let me just tell you, there are a million fat puppy videos out there, and they're fabulous. Right? Whether that's, pets, plants, doing your nails, turning on happy music. I suggest to everyone that you make a Spotify playlist of...
Or Apple Music, whatever your
Apple
choice
Music,
is.
right? Device of choice, right? That is happy music. What is this happy music that I need to turn to? And you need to make it when you're in a calm state so that you can kick that sucker on, right? Wherever you are. But it can also be things like volunteering, getting out of our own heads.
Service is definitely something Susan talks about too. So yeah.
Yeah, right. And there's 9 million opportunities out there. For some people, self-care is about connection, right? That very often we'll call each other, or we have our little triad text thread going, and we'll communicate with each other on that just to celebrate something or verbalize a struggle, and that feels great to me. Like that's one of the best dopamine hits that I have in my day. And so whether that's picking up a hobby, or right, I'll ask people like, what have you always wanted to do, or what did you used to do that you no longer do that you really loved, that brought you joy, right? Whatever that is. Like I know, like Bonnie and I are knitters. We love us.
Yeah, we do a lot of art.
Right. Yeah, I love.
I do knitting. I do metal sculpture.
Why they're friends with me is beyond me.
I do
guys.
pottery.
creative human being.
I am creative. I just create in different ways. But
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Those are things that I do too. I like to make art. I just have to be careful sometimes that those don't become. And maybe that's what you were going to get with the self-sabotage, is that...
What a great... What a nice segue.
I will initiate a project that ends up being a very overwhelmingly large project that also becomes its own problem. Yeah.
Right. And so self-sabotage can be... well, see, I need to do self-care, so I have to go out and buy the really expensive... watercolors and paper and this, and I can justify that because that's, quote unquote self-care. Or I should buy the massage package at the local place for $1,000 because see, that's self-care. And the problem is that then becomes self-sabotage. Right?
If that wasn't really in your budget, then that's not really self-care. Right. That's going to add a stressor to your life.
Right.
Because you're going to be in debt.
Or if I tell myself for 7 months that it's okay to sit on the couch.
Right.
Every day. right? Is that then becoming self-sabotage? Am I using that as a rationalization to why I don't actually have to do X, Y, Z,
right?
Or if I say, well, but I'm tired and I don't want to write my food plan out for tomorrow. That then is becoming self-sabotage. And I think in our society, we use a lot of language about things being self-care that really in the end are self-sabotage, right? And I think that's a really fine line, and we need to be willing to look at that. And
how do you measure that? I mean, I guess that's my question, is like, how do you make that determination, whether it's something that's truly self-care or whether you might be going down that self-sabotage?
Maybe you can use the same things that we use for the food, right?
Right.
You got peace around it. Is it escalating? Is it affecting your program?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to tie that back into the bacon conversation of
previous episode.
The bacon episode, right? And that's a really personal thing, to look at that and to maybe be willing to have that hard conversation. That if you're not reaching your goals, if you're not actually getting to where you want to be, right? Which is why I think it is really important to kind of define, why is it that you said you wanted to be on this journey? Where did you say you wanted to go? And if you're struggling to maybe follow through on some of the things that you said you wanted to do, you may need to reevaluate. Okay, maybe we added exercise in too soon, and that's too much, and maybe I need to downgrade that a little bit. Right? Maybe I have multiple life stressors that were going on this month that weren't going on last month, and maybe that means I need to increase my connection with people. Maybe that means I need to, reach out for a coaching call. Maybe that means I need to, if you're seeing a therapist, all right, maybe that means you need to increase to weekly sessions if you had maybe downgraded that a little bit. But looking at, kind of where is that fine line, and it's a slippery slope. And I think the visual that I always use is when you are going down the slippery slope, you don't always realize when you've passed, the line until you're about 5 miles past it, right? And that can be really painful to realize, I've been actually, this habit has now become self-sabotaging, right? And I need to reevaluate why I'm using that, or why am I choosing that, and not in a judgmental way, right? Because again, the parts work, right? That those managers that we have can be that voice of judgment, and instead of looking at your behavior with judgment, right, to look at it with kindness and compassion,
and
right?
curiosity
in that self, to go, oh my gosh, I realized that I was doing XYZ, and that was an escape from this. That was an avoidance of this.
Yeah.
And can I then go, okay, well, what would I like to choose differently?
Yeah. Without the condemnation. I think that's that's the message there, is that you can adjust at any point, right?
You can pivot.
You can pivot. And back to kind of just the self-care thought, the self-care, talk. I think that it is important to be gentle with yourself. I think it is important to recognize, whether you call it parts work or you call it something else, that if one of the things that you have used food for historically in your life is as an indulgence or as a comfort or something like that, replacing that is going to be necessary. It's not, removing something without replacing it with something else, I think probably is a recipe for failure. And so I think that that's something that we definitely should think about in our programs. And I know that, like I said, I did that work really early on when I was going through the original modules and being introduced to parts work, and just really understanding that was pretty integral to who I was, is needing that self-care. So Robin, what do you like to do for self-care?
Oh, I mean, garden centers. I love to, and we had talked about, I like to just walk around a garden center. I like to pull weeds. I like to knit. I do art, and I love to laugh.
Yeah.
I will turn on, a funny show or funny videos, and that just brings me that relief.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story is you have to find what, you know, lights you up and what gives you that joy in your life. And there's no right or wrong answer. I don't think, personally. I think that, you know, you can choose for you what makes sense to you. I'm not a gardener, and I'm, you know, so being in the garden sounds like a lot of work to me and does not sound like self-care. But the two people sitting around the table with me love that, and they find that very relaxing. So, you know, it's not necessary that your life has to model someone else's. You know, it can definitely be your own thing, and it can look weird. You know, I think that's the other thing is like self-care, you know, as long as it's not, you know, harmful and damaging, like it can be whatever, you know, whatever you choose it to be. Reading a book, you know, I have a friend that loves to read, and that's like her favorite thing. So it's something that she does all the time, and it's like that's not everybody's choice, but that's hers, and you know, I love that. So, any further thoughts on?
One other thing I think is that if you're a BLE member, and you don't have to be a BLE member to follow the BLE program, but if you're a member, you have access to all the educational modules from the boot camp on up that have ever been made. And sometimes what I'll do is just listen to some modules if I'm feeling kind of, you know, it just regrounds me. It reminds me, there's a lot of information in there that helps you do the inner work, what we call the inner work, which is working on, you know, the things about you that probably contributed to your food addiction, and just general growth, right? Emotional and spiritual growth. And so it's a great place to go for that kind of information. I do a couple modules a week. I go back over modules I've already listened to, and it just keeps me in the mindset of thinking about continually examining my thoughts and my patterns and my behaviors to make sure that I'm doing self-care, to make sure that I'm remembering my why do I do this. And it reminds me that continuing to work on my self-growth is also a really good thing. That is also a self-care.
It absolutely
it is. Self-care doesn't have to be sexy.
Right.
Self-care is things like doing the modules, writing your food down, right? Those anything that you are doing that makes your life better.
Going to therapy.
That is also self-care.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, they're like, well, but that feels like work. I'm like, right, but if it makes your life flow better, then that is also self-care.
Then it's the good work.
Yeah.
And too, I think what you were saying really brought up with me is that this work is never done. It's never gonna be done. I mean, I'm gonna be a food addict for the rest of my life, and that might sound hopeless, but it's you know, honestly, this at this point in my program, it's not hopeless that I'm gonna be a food addict for the rest of my life, because I have a lot of tools in my tool belt now, and I know you know, Robin doesn't necessarily like the coping tools, but it's, you know, I feel like I have a lot of tools in my tool belt now that I can go to that are not food that I never had before in my life. And thankful obviously to the Brightline Eating Program, but just also to my journey that I've been on. So I think that's
well, and I don't think it's hopeless, because it's not that you're a food addict for the rest of your life. It's that I am now aware of how food affects me in my mind and my body for the rest of my life, and I'm gonna commit to growing and learning and evolving as a person for the rest of my life. And that's kind of how I view it. It's like, I think that's a great thing. I finally embraced reality, which is that I have the capacity to continue to grow and change for the rest of my life. It doesn't have to stop. There's no end point for that.
And that's a wonderful thing, right? And that's taking the black and white out of it. The right, I'm either perfect or I'm awful, right? And it's saying, well, the gray reality is that we are all works in progress. And we are all like trying to climb this self-actualization mountain. And just become better and better versions of ourselves, and there is no end point to that.
So there's the hope, guys, and that's today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you later.